Here's an idea you can try out when you've got little bits of canvas lying around and they're not big enough to use for a normal painting. So what I like to do is paint warm-ups. And warm-ups are a great way to just get yourself back in the groove for painting. Maybe you just don't have the energy for something too big. Do a few little warm-ups and you'll have a lot of fun. And not waste your canvas. Here's how I do it. Okay, this is obviously quite simple. I like to have loose canvas like this in the studio. I use it to sometimes stretch a canvas, of course, but very often just to glue down on a panel. And I'll show you how I do that in another video. But also, what's quite often is I'll end up with a little piece here or there that's cut off. And the stuff is quite expensive, so I don't like to throw it away unless it's really too small. So I had a few little pieces left over that were just big enough to do little miniature paintings. And as I said, I like to call them warm-ups because I can do them in 10, perhaps 15 minutes and have something that gets the ideas flowing, and maybe they look okay in their own right and you could frame them up and make a nice little miniature painting. Well, this was one I did in my studio and I decided to film it just to show you my process, and maybe it'll inspire you to use bits of off-cut canvas or even bits of cardboard that are lying around and you could just gesso them up. Same sort of idea. Here's the reference, and it's a really beautiful scene, but you'll notice the light is quite muted. And there's my little piece of canvas. As you can see, also very small. My typical painting palette of colors, no surprises there. So I'm just going to start off with a very rough little sketch just to settle the composition and get it sort of right in my mind. And just paint. This is what the warm-up is all about. Just get the creative juices flowing and spending no time to dawdle on any preparations here. It's just get straight in, put some color down. And one thing I'm trying out here and just getting the roots of an idea going in my mind is how to change the appearance of the scene by changing up the colors a bit. As I mentioned, the reference, it's a fairly sort of kind of overcast day that when I took that photograph, and I want a bit more of a light-filled painting. So I'm going to take some suggestions and bring in some more light, heighten the colors, just get them a little more saturated, slightly more high key, still bring in some shadows and create a sense of light. Now the sky is quite bright, and what shadows there are in the scene are very muted, very gentle. Because the light is so muted and gentle in the painting, I've got to just try to heighten the colors a bit more. So using some of that cerulean blue and green has given me a brighter, more almost a spring-like color to the greens. And here I'm using an orange just to suggest some of these, well, these are cypresses, I think, but we get similar shaped trees that have a more sort of autumn colors as well in this area. So I'm going to pick up on that and bring that in as strong vertical elements. And that touch of orange is playing against the blues I'm bringing in to suggest these succulents and other plants of that nature in this dry region. This is actually a little village called New Bethesda in the Karoo region in South Africa. And I got these lovely Victorian houses all over, and of course the climate is quite harsh, but there's lots of water underground, so we get these lovely trees. And there's that color coming in. So the color temperature of the scene is being changed, and it has a knock-on effect once you start warming up colors and bringing in light and shadow. The whole painting gets a different sense to it. But I'm making these decisions as I go, and there's no real penalty if it turns out all weird, and because it doesn't matter, because it really is simply, like I said, a warm-up, but also an experiment. Everything is an idea that is tested, and if it's a good one, hopefully it'll stick in the old memory box and come up in another painting. So I'm not too sure about that sort of pinkish color on the hillside in the distance, but it's there to suggest sunlight coming in from left to right. I'll just clear off the palette a bit and get a bit more space to work. And mixing up this warm color, which I'm going to bring into the road, sort of a warmed up yellow ochre, as it were. And this lightish orange. And this comes down to trying out some complementary colors. The blues on the left, the orangey warm colors for the road. So it's quickly turning into something a bit more expressive as well, and the reference is simply a guide. But I've got to get some structure as well, so the shadows help to do that. They link up one part of the painting to the other, and they create a strong visual contrast of values. And if you have a strong shadow, by implication, you've got a strong light. It's when we forget to bring in that strong shadow contrast, we inadvertently destroy the light in a painting. And you may wonder why your painting's looking flat or doesn't have that sparkle. It's because the values are too centered in the center of the value scale. You've got to bring in the extremes as well. So I'm imagining a touch of warm light on the top of the building, and then the cool, shadowy white colors. And how you get that sort of cool gray color to suggest the building in shadow varies. You can use a soft violet, for instance. You can create a gray with cerulean and orange and white. Add more blue to make it a cool gray. Add a little bit more of a warm color like the orange to warm up that gray and make it something that's perhaps got a little bit of reflected light into it. Okay, these yellows are somewhat saturated and not my favorite level of saturation, but I feel the painting's starting to go into that sort of expressive color range. So I'm riding that for a bit further. Now putting in the shadows of the building, mixing up a violet for the stronger shadows. Now you notice the shadows under the roof in the reference are very dark. As long as I'm making a dark of some sort in relation to the other values in the painting, it'll work. It doesn't have to be almost black to make it a strong shadow. What helps, of course, is that the shadows are quite cool, and that reinforces the idea of a deep, strong shadow as well. So in a little painting like this, details are secondary. Just think of the basic shapes. Try to do in one shape what you could do in perhaps 10 smaller shapes on a larger surface. And this forces you to think about the economies of your brushwork. How to just suggest something with 1 or 2 strokes. It does make you think. And then once you've done that, it's a great technique and something you can draw upon later when you faced with a scene that you have to paint a bit quicker and get something down. You know what the essential shape has to be. I know this sounds a bit vague if you haven't tried these ideas out before, but just one simple and strong shape is so much better for you than overdoing it. So simplicity, composition, and then putting it down in a simple structure. And that'll do so much more for your painting in the long run. Okay, I've got a rigger brush out here. I've got to get a few smaller shapes. The utility pole is a very important vertical element here. Adding some structure, calming down the more abstract shapes. Also suggesting that tree a bit as well, just giving it some strength. Notice I put down 3 utility poles on the right because you always want to put an odd number of repetitive shapes. So if you got utility poles, 3 is better than 2 and 5 is better than 4. I'm not sure why that's the case. It's just seems to be how our mind is wired. Neatening up now, just to strengthen a few shapes, get rid of some of that white canvas as well here or there. In some areas the shapes have got a bit fussy, and I'll go over that now with a bigger dollop of paint on the brush and just neaten it up by eliminating 3 shapes and turning it into one big juicy brush stroke. That also seems to have a beneficial effect. I think spotting where your painting's getting a bit fussy and if your eye is attracted to an area off to the side of your canvas, you've got to pause for a moment and ask yourself whether a viewer is going to be distracted as well, away from the focal area or some important point of the painting. If that's the case, get rid of that distracting detail and get a big brush and just eliminate that bunch of fussy shapes, and make sure you try to plan where the viewer is going to go with your painting. With this one, of course, it's along the road, that's the main thing, and heading off to the end of the road. But a secondary point will be the building, just to see what can be made out there, and to make sure the focal point is sort of accentuated. I'm going to pop in a little figure, just a dash of red to attract the eye, and I've got to refine the shape a little and cut in with some surrounding colors. I'm not too fussed about it. It's not. This is not a painting I'm putting up into the gallery as such, but just got to get some basics sorted out. The head is a bit large. I'm going to just cut in with some surrounding colors, and gets a bit fussy with these little figures sometimes. And shadow. This one leg should be a bit longer, so I'll suggest that in the shadow as well. And now at least we have something to ensure the focal area is established. A few of those distant trees described in a stroke or two of the brush. I want to repeat some of the red of the figure, even if it is a sort of a reddish orange. And that's pretty much it, really. A few little accents, dark accents here or there. Sign it off. Let's take the tape off, and that's the little warm-up painting. And it's always fun, because I know there's no real pressure. And it was a little piece of canvas that could have ended up in the bin, but instead there's a little bit of painting experience under the belt, and something to put aside and have a look at another time. Well, I hope that's given you something to try out. A no-stress warm-up painting. Really just a lot of fun. Now be sure to subscribe to this channel so you don't miss the forthcoming videos, and there are going to be plenty more coming. And have a look up here or in the description for a link to a free painting course on my painting school. Something to try out and see what inspires you over there. Well, until next time, happy painting and cheers for now.